occurs in this event year after year. Every time Circassians get together, good things happen. Every time minds meet, produce good ideas become realities, and we go forward with that, and we build a constructive, brighter future for Circassians. So thank you for having me. But I wanted to say that since 1864 until now, as we speak, Circassian diaspora have been living in identity crisis. And it's starting with the notion that if the Russian policy during the Russian war against Circassians and Circassia was not Circassian, their slogan was Circassia without Circassians, meaning that they wanted to empty Circassia from Circassians, then we would have been here today as representative of a Circassian nation. We would have had parliamentarians here as Circassians who are serving in the European Parliament as representative of a Circassian nation, because our nation, our people is the European people, and we are well deserving of having place in this parliament by our representative from our nations sometime near in the future. We would have our representative here, and we would have had our nation Circassia, and our capital would have been Sochi, and Circassian would have been in Sochi today. But the fact is that Sochi does not have any Circassian, a very small, limited number of Circassians in it. But since 1864 until now, we have been living in what we call now identity crisis. We are here, all of us today, because we do have identity crisis. We do have a Circassian identity. We are trying every day to protect it. We build organizations to protect it. We put efforts to protect it. We go on demonstrations to protect it. But for 147 years, each and every one of us, including the ones who oppose our activity, do feel that we are losing our identity by the day. You have Circassian mothers today who tell you that yes, we are losing our identity. We do have a Circassian generation who's going to come sometime soon who will barely know that they are Circassians. So something must be done. And all our effort here and in the past and at any time in Turkey, in the United States, or in Europe, or in the Middle East would have to be focused and salvaging what is remained to us from our Circassian identity and existence. So instead of having a European nation that participates in the development of the human society, we are demised now to a nation that largely live in exile, worrying from day to day whether we are going to cook shipsu pasta or make haliva or dance qafa. And this is the extent of our activities for the past 147 years. I am, as I speak today, as a Circassian, whose father is Hatuqai and whose mother is Qabardian, I am a victim of the genocide. I have lived in a country where my family was not allowed to live in the Circassian society, where I could not learn my native language, and there are many people like me. And I do not need anyone to prove to me that there was a genocide. I know it was. And I don't need any governments to take advantage of any political situation to convince others that this was a genocide. For me, as a Circassian, I do know that it's a genocide, and everybody here knows this fact, and we know who committed and continue to commit that genocide against each and every one of us. And if we have any doubts, we need to look at the political scene in the Caucasus today, and in the Northwest Caucasus and Circassia, and look at who is sticking his finger in our Circassian affairs, both inside Circassia and outside Circassia. And then we will know who is the wicked perpetrator who committed and continued to commit genocide against our people. Having said all these things in accusatory terms, but they are reality, of course, it is important to know that since 2006, we have been active, and we have decided as a group of Circassians to activate some type of work in order to salvage what remained of our identity as Circassians. And then we came to the International Circassian Association, the ICA, the Mevso Adigakasa meeting in Istanbul in 2006. And here's the facts that I found. Here is what I observed as a Circassian who came to the most important conference in the history of my being a Circassian, and that is in Istanbul. Number one, that discovered that Circassians cannot talk freely. You have to take permission from FSB and KGB officers who are planted in our association to control what we say and how we say it, and whom do we say it to. So where is the freedom of speech here? If I have to be concerned about what an FSB officer is going to monitor of my conversation, where is my freedom of speech as Circassian? Number one. Number two, discovered that FSB officers, not only that they do affect the functioning of our organization, they do control also big and large numbers of our hamadas to make sure that our organizations, each and every one of them, with the exception of few, function according to the guidelines of the Russian policy in our motherland, Circassia. Meaning that if the Russians don't like something we do in our organization in Istanbul, that they could stop it because it affects their policy in Circassia. And this includes repatriation, freedom of visiting, freedom of speech, communicating with our relatives in the Caucasus, and putting strains and restrictions on all these things. And everybody here knows this. They will tell you, don't say this, because if you say this, Russians will not let you go to Circassia. Well, guess what? The United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People says, and this is an internationally recognized declaration based on the laws of the human rights in the United Nations, that no one can put restriction on me as a native Circassian or anyone here to participate in any activities in the Caucasus or in Circassia, to visit or to make any conditions for me to become part of my native nation of Circassians in Circassia who have been living there. And if I do not have that connection, then eventually I will lose that identity. So they are in violation of the internationally recognized law of the United Nations, and that is the Indigenous Declaration of the Indigenous People Declaration of Rights of the United Nations that was passed in September 13th of 2006. So the Russian Federation has been in violation of internationally recognized agreement and declarations since the year 2006 until now. And everybody in the leadership of our organizations know this. And no one is willing to do anything. Third discovery we made in our ICA visit in 2006, that we as Circassians from the United States, we are despised. We are treated differently. As soon as one of the people who was head of one of the offices of the organization walks in the dinner time, when we had a very cordial time with brothers and sisters who are Circassians from Turkey, and he sits with the table and he gives the signal to people, the entire treatment of us as Circassians from the United States was changed. We were treated like strangers. And we were called, until now, CIA. I as a Circassian, I as an Adiga, to be an Adiga in Turkey, I would have to be called a Central Intelligence Agency officer. And this is the slogan that we have. And this is how the Russian Federation and other people in the world today, they ask the superpower of the world not to stick their finger. Nobody is sticking his finger in the Caucasus. The only person, the only entity that is sticking its finger in the Caucasus in order to control what I do as a Circassian and what you do is the Russian Federation and its FSB officers. Make it clear. And this is the truth. And everyone knows. Now, we came to the ICA meeting, we thought that we are Adigas, and we established an organization, and we called it the Circassian Cultural Institute, and we submitted the papers to become members in that organization. And of course, we submitted all the necessary papers, and I sent the papers from the United States to the ICA by Federal Express. The mail itself cost $200. We paid the fees. Until now, as we speak today, 7 years later, we have not heard a word because we, in their views, because we are Adigas from the United States, we are CIA. And all these officers who are serving in the ICA, in the Dunaib Saudi Casa, in many different organizations who work directly for the Russian intelligence are okay. But we are Adigas from the United States or CIA. So we initiated a series of actions and reactions, and we had focused mainly on the things that are of great importance to the Circassians. When we were in Istanbul, and right after that, in a short period of time, a group of young Circassians in Turkey, mainly the Caucasus Forum and other activist people who are highly intelligent people, very educated, very straightforward, and very clear in their thoughts, decided that the Sochi Olympics is going to be held in the land of genocide. So they put together a memorandum. They created that memorandum and they passed it to many different Circassian organizations under the umbrella of members of the organization committee of the Sochi, the land of genocide. And we all signed on it that we as Circassians, we will not accept that the IOC of the Russian Federation conduct one of the most festive events of the human society, and that is the Sochi Olympics, where thousands, but hundreds of thousands of Circassians, men, women, and children, who are like us actually, who were our families, who spoke Adigabza, who sat down for 2 years on the shores of the Black Sea, specifically in the place where Sochi is, and they perished dying. They were raped, they were killed, they were slaughtered, they were shipped on ships, and they were drowned in the Black Sea. Our forefathers, until now, at that time and until now, many Adigas in Turkey do not eat fish, and nobody knows why. And the reason is because our forefathers considered that the fish in the Black Sea ate the flesh of our people. And this is a fact that you all should know. Because many of the Hatukai tribe, my tribe, almost its entirety was drowned and killed in the Black Sea. So this was the very first initiative regarding the campaign of anti-Sochi. Was initiated by the Caucasus Forum guys. Bragg guys also put together a slogan, and that slogan was the 5 circles of the Olympic Games, and they made them in fire. As soon as that logo was introduced to our societies, to our educated communities throughout the world, it gained a high momentum of speed, and everybody started seeing that someone is going to hold the Olympic circles of fire over the land where our forefathers and mothers and daughters and sisters and children were slaughtered. At that time, we realized that individual Circassian, actually in the Caucasus, had been working for years in collecting documents about the Circassian genocide. And they would send people to different Russian cities and different museums and different libraries to copy by hand documents about what the Russians have done to Circassians. And there was a big collection of these documents were collected, and they were gathered and they were put together, and people from Jordan, from Syria, from Turkey worked together on translating all these documents to different languages, and they presented them. We have them today presented in CDs. We have a limited number of them. We could give you some of these, but you could also check them on our website, and I will give you the names of the websites later on. But these are documents were collected by Circassians about the Circassian genocide, translated by Circassians who are sitting here, in order for other Circassians to understand what had happened to our people and to what extent the tragedy was so severe. And they submitted, of course, letters to the Duma, and they submitted letters to the President of the Russian Federation, they submitted letters to the IOC, and at no time this group of young Circassians, supported by us and other groups in the world of Circassian group, had received any support from any Ediga organizations that is credible and that is managed by true management team. And we received neither from the Duma or from the President of the Russian Federation or the IOC any answers that are worthwhile reading to you today. You mean that there is no genocide, leave us alone, go about your own business. You live in Turkey, 6 million of there, be there, become Turks, and that's the end of the story. And for the Syrian, that's Circassian in Syria and Jordan, why don't you just become Arabs and leave us alone?